You were just a temporary wife, they said at his memorial. So I read them the deed and the trust that made every Pruitt answer to me. Dale set the casserole dish down on my dining table so hard the lid rang, and before the sound had even faded, he said it in front of 40 people. "Let's not make this awkward, Glenda. You were a temporary wife. Sign the papers, take your things, and let the family keep what's ours." The dish was green bean, still warm, and the smell of fried onions filled the room where I had folded my husband's socks 2 weeks earlier. Behind Dale, his wife Marlene nodded like she was agreeing to a hymn. Somebody's phone buzzed on the sideboard. My husband's folded funeral flag sat on the mantel 8 feet away, the blue field and 3 white stars facing out. And I looked at it instead of at Dale's face, because if I looked at Dale, I was going to smile too soon. 40 people in my living room, and every single one of them thought I was the one about to lose everything. They had no idea whose name was on the deed. They had never once asked who signed the trust. Let me go back to the beginning, because you need to understand exactly how sure they were before you understand how quiet the room got. I grew up in Copperas Cove, Texas, 12 miles from Fort Hood, in a rented 2-bedroom on Skyline Drive where the porch light flickered every time the AC kicked on. My mother, Dorothy, cleaned rooms at a motor lodge off Highway 190 for $6.75 an hour, and my father drove a propane truck until his heart quit at 51. We were the kind of poor that irons its one good shirt. I learned to count money early because there was never enough of it to be careless. By the time I was 19, I was working the front desk at a title company in Killeen, heart of Texas Title on Rancier Avenue, pulling deeds, reading legal descriptions, watching how property actually moved from one hand to another. That job paid $11.25 an hour in 2004, and it taught me the thing that would eventually save my whole life. The person who holds the paper wins, not the person who yells the loudest. The person who holds the paper. I met Wade Pruitt in the spring of 2009 at a Sonic on Fort Hood Street, both of us reaching for the same cardboard tray of tater tots the car hop had set down wrong. He was a specialist then, E4, 26 years old, with a laugh that came up out of his chest like it surprised him every time. He had a scar on his left thumb from a fishing hook, and he ordered his cherry limeade with extra cherries like a kid. 6 weeks in, he told me he'd never met anybody who read the fine print for fun. 6 months in, he told me his family was a lot, and he wasn't wrong. The Pruitts were Killeen royalty in their own minds. Dale Pruitt had retired as a sergeant first class in 1998 and gone straight into a used car lot on Veterans Memorial Boulevard, Pruitt Auto Sales, which he treated like a fiefdom. Marlene ran the family like a church committee. There were 2 older sons, Cole, who managed the car lot and wore his father's opinions like a borrowed jacket, and Brett, who lived in Temple and showed up mainly for holidays and handouts. Wade was the youngest, the soft-hearted one, the one who'd actually deployed while his brothers found reasons not to. The family home was a 2,400-square-foot brick ranch on a 1/3 acre lot on Cardinal Lane, built in 1996, and Dale talked about that house like it was Monticello. The Pruitt homestead, he'd say, thumping the doorframe, stays in the blood. Here is the part they forgot. In 2011, when Wade and I got married at the Bell County Courthouse for the price of a $71 license and a lunch at Cracker Barrel, the Cardinal Lane house was drowning. Dale had borrowed against it twice to keep the car lot breathing through the recession, and he was $118,000 upside down, 4 months behind, with a foreclosure sale date already printed. He came to Wade with his hat in his hands because his other 2 sons had nothing. And Wade came to me because by then I was no longer the girl at the front desk. I was a licensed title examiner, and I'd spent 7 years quietly buying tax lien certificates and a duplex on Zephyr Road that cleared $900 a month. I had $94,000 saved and a credit score of 811, and I knew exactly what I was looking at. I did the thing nobody in that family ever thanked me for. Wade and I paid off the arrears, refinanced the Cardinal Lane house in our two names, and put $61,000 down to bring it right side up. And because I was who I was, I did it correctly. The new deed, recorded January 2012 in the Bell County Property Records, instrument number I could recite in my sleep, was a general warranty deed with right of survivorship, naming Wade Pruitt and Glenda Pruitt as joint tenants. Dale signed his interest away at the closing table with a Bic pen, grinning, calling me the smart one, slapping Wade on the back. He never read it. He thought he was still the king of the homestead. He thought he was doing us a favor by letting us live there while he stayed in the smaller place on Zephyr, my old duplex, which I rented to him and Marlene at a family discount of $650 a month. That was the seed of the whole thing, and they walked right past it for 13 years. The early years were genuinely good, and I won't let anybody's cruelty take that from me. Wade deployed to Afghanistan in 2012 and came home in 2013, and we planted a live oak in the Cardinal Lane backyard that first fall. He re-enlisted, made sergeant, then staff sergeant. We repainted the kitchen a color called wheat bread and argued happily about a backsplash for a month. On Sundays, the whole family came over and I cooked brisket, King Ranch chicken, my mother's peach cobbler, in the house I'd saved, serving people who never once said thank you and always said, "Marlene taught Glenda that recipe," when Marlene had taught me nothing. I let it go. I loved Wade, and Wade loved his family, and I have always been willing to be underestimated when the paperwork is in my favor. But I noticed everything. I always did. The first wrong note came at Thanksgiving 2014. Marlene was seating people, and she put me at the kids' folding table in the garage next to Brett's stepdaughter, while Cole's new girlfriend of 3 weeks sat at the main table. "Family up here, hun," Marlene said, patting the good chair. Wade started to object, and I touched his knee under the table and let it pass. But I wrote it down that night, the way I write down everything, in a spiral notebook I kept in my nightstand, dated, factual. Not out of drama, out of habit. The title business teaches you that memory lies and records don't. The second note was money. Of course it was. In 2016, Dale's car lot hit another rough patch, and he borrowed $14,000 from Wade, from us, with a handshake and a promise to pay it back by Christmas. There was no Christmas payment. There was no payment at all. When I gently asked Dale about it at a birthday party the following June, he looked at me over his plate of ribs and said, loud enough for the patio to hear, "Careful, sweetheart. Wade's money is Pruitt money. You're a bookkeeper's daughter. You wouldn't understand how family works." Cole laughed. Marlene smiled into her sweet tea. I said nothing. I went home and I wrote the date, the amount, and the exact words. Bookkeeper's daughter. My father drove a propane truck, and my mother cleaned motel rooms. But I let Dale have his little insult, because insults are free and evidence is forever. The third note was the trust, and this is where they truly buried themselves. In 2018, Dale got it into his head that the family needed an estate plan, mostly because his golf buddy had one and it made him feel important. He wanted a family trust to hold the car lot, the Zephyr duplex he was renting from me and had somehow started calling his, and, he assumed, the Cardinal Lane house. He wanted it to look official. But Dale was cheap, and Dale was lazy, and Dale did not want to pay an attorney the retainer. So he did what the Pruitts always did. He turned to the one person in the family who actually understood documents and made her do the work for free. "Glenda handles that paper stuff," he told everyone. "She'll set it up." So I set it up. I want to be very clear that I did nothing sneaky. I did everything in the open, in daylight, with signatures. I drove to an estate attorney I trusted, a woman named Priya Sinclair, sharp as a fresh blade, who had an office on Elms Road and charged Dale a flat $2,400 that he complained about for a year. Sinclair drafted the Pruitt family trust exactly the way the family instructed. It would hold the car lot's real estate, the business assets, and the family's affairs, and it would be managed by a trustee. Dale, being Dale, did not want to be the trustee himself because he didn't want the paperwork or the liability. He wanted to be the beneficiary who gave orders. Cole didn't want it because Cole could barely manage the oil changes. Brett was in Temple and useless. Marlene didn't do numbers. "Just put Glenda as trustee," Dale said, waving his hand, signing where the little colored tabs told him to sign. "She likes that stuff, keeps it in the family." I became the sole trustee of the Pruitt Family Trust on September 19th, 2018. Dale signed it, Marlene signed it, Cole signed it as a witness. They funded it with the car lot property and the business. Everything Dale owned that mattered, deeded into a trust I controlled, because they could not imagine, not in 100 years, a world in which the bookkeeper's daughter would ever need it. To them, a trustee was a secretary. To the law, a trustee is the one who holds the paper. I filed my copy in a fireproof box in the Cardinal Lane closet next to the deed, and I said thank you and made everyone brisket. Wade knew. Wade was proud of me. "They think they're using you," he said one night, laughing that chest laugh, "and they got no idea you're the whole spine of this family now." He kissed my forehead. "Just don't ever let 'em make you feel small, Glenn." I promised him I wouldn't. It's one of the few promises I've ever had trouble keeping, because Wade was the thing that stood between me and the Pruitts. And in March 2024, Wade was gone. Staff Sergeant Wade Pruitt died during a training accident at a joint exercise, 38 years old. And the Army gave me a folded flag and a set of benefits and a hole in the middle of my life that no deed will ever fill. 2 soldiers in dress blues stood on my porch on Cardinal Lane, where the lights still flickered when the AC kicked on, and one of them held out the flag, tucked into that tight blue and white triangle, and said the words about a grateful nation. I took it with both hands. I set it on the mantel above the fireplace in the house I had saved, and for 2 weeks it was the only thing in the world I could look at without falling down. The Pruitts gave me exactly 11 days to grieve before they came for everything. It started with Cole, who showed up on a Tuesday to check on me and spent 40 minutes walking the house, measuring things with his eyes. It moved to Marlene, who called to say the family thought it best if I moved somewhere smaller, somewhere more appropriate for a widow, and that they'd found me a 1-bedroom apartment off Tremere Road that they'd help with. It escalated to a letter, an actual letter, on paper, drafted by some strip mall lawyer Dale had paid $500, asserting that the Cardinal Lane house was Pruitt family property, and that I, as a surviving spouse of relatively brief tenure, should relinquish it along with any interest in Wade's service members' group life insurance and the survivor benefits. Because here is what they were really after, underneath the house. Wade's SGLI paid out $400,000. As his widow, I was the sole named beneficiary, plus the dependency and indemnity compensation and the survivor annuity. Real money, monthly money, the government's promise to the person who shared the soldier's life. Dale wanted it, all of it. He'd convinced himself that because Wade had Pruitt blood, the Pruitt family, not the widow, deserved the payout. He actually said at the reading of Wade's simple will that survivor benefits going to a wife of only 13 years was a loophole the family should correct. 13 years. I saved their house in year 1 and became their trust's spine in year 7, and Dale called it a loophole. The boiling point came at the memorial gathering itself in the house on Cardinal Lane 2 weeks after the funeral. It was supposed to be a reception. The whole family, friends, Wade's Army buddies, my people and theirs, casseroles on every surface. Instead, Dale turned it into an eviction. He'd waited for a crowd on purpose, the way a bully always does, because he thought a crowd would shame me into folding. He walked in with a manila folder and Marlene and Cole flanking him like deputies, and he set that green bean casserole down on my table, and he said the thing I opened with. Temporary wife, Sign the papers, take your things, let the family keep what's ours. The room went quiet the way rooms do when everyone smells blood and picks a side. And here's the terrible thing, the thing that would have broken a different woman. The room's silence was against me. I saw it on their faces. Wade's cousins, the neighbors, even a couple of the soldiers who didn't know the history. They looked at the grieving father in his dark suit, the mother dabbing her eyes, and they looked at me, the quiet daughter-in-law with no Pruitt blood, and the sympathy in the room tilted toward Dale. That's how it works. The system, family, crowd, the whole social machine, sides with the loud man in the suit first. I had spent my whole life watching it happen. I did not cry. I want you to understand that I felt something turn over in my chest, cold and clean, like a bolt sliding home. There's a specific quiet that comes when you stop hoping people will be decent and start simply reading them the record. I looked at the folded flag on the mantel, and I looked at Dale's satisfied face, and the decision made itself in about 1 second. I excused myself to the kitchen, and I made one phone call. "Priya," I said when Sinclair picked up, "it's time. Bring the file, the deed, the trust, the whole binder. And bring Nuala's copies of the texts. They just did it in front of 40 witnesses." Priya Sinclair, who had been waiting for this call for 2 weeks, said only, "I'm 11 minutes out. Don't sign anything. Don't say anything. Pour yourself a glass of water. Let them keep talking." Let me tell you what I had already built, quietly, in the 11 days they gave me to grieve. Because the reckoning didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of preparation, the way it always does with me. The moment Cole started measuring my house with his eyes, I had known. So I'd gone to see Priya Sinclair the same week and pulled every document into one binder. The general warranty deed with right of survivorship, recorded 2012, which meant that the second Wade died, the Cardinal Lane house passed to me automatically, by operation of law, no probate, no will, no vote. It was already mine, 100%, the day Dale walked in with his casserole. He was trying to evict me from a house I solely owned. The Pruitt Family Trust Instrument, signed 2018, which named me, Glenda Pruitt, sole trustee with full legal control over the car lot property on Veterans Memorial Boulevard and the Zephyr Road duplex the family lived in. Dale had spent 6 years thinking he owned those. He didn't. The trust owned them, and I ran the trust. Legally, every Pruitt asset that mattered ran through my signature. The $14,000 loan from 2016, documented in Wade's own handwriting in a text thread I still had, plus 3 more loans over the years, totaling $31,500. None repaid. And Nuala. I have to tell you about Nuala. Nuala Boyd was my closest friend, a fellow Army wife I'd met at a family readiness group meeting in 2013. Her husband served in Wade's battalion. Nuala was Irish-tempered and Colleen tough, and she had been at 3 of the family gatherings where Dale had insulted me, and she had, God bless her, screen-recorded and saved things over the years, the way a good friend saves receipts. More than that, Nuala had been standing right next to Marlene at the funeral home when Marlene said to another woman, "Once Glenda's gone, we'll finally have the house clean of her." And Nuala had it on her phone, time-stamped, clear as a bell. Nuala was my conscience witness. She was the one person in that whole crowd who had quietly, fiercely, always been on my side. Priya had also, at my request, already prepared 2 clean documents. One was a formal notice on Sinclair Law letterhead informing the Pruitt family that as sole trustee, I was exercising my authority to terminate the family's tenancy at the Zephyr Road duplex and to review all trust distributions, including whether the car lot's ongoing losses justified selling the property. The other was a simple, devastating 1-page summary of who legally owned what. Facts, instrument numbers, dates, no adjectives. I had spent 13 years being underestimated. I had spent 11 days getting ready. When Priya's silver Acura pulled into my driveway, I walked back into my living room and I let Dale finish his speech. He was really enjoying it by then. He'd opened the manila folder and was holding up his $500 lawyer's letter like a subpoena. "It's all here, Glenda," he said, turning so the crowd could see. "The house, the benefits. The right thing is to keep it in the family." Wade would have wanted it that way. "You've had a nice run, but you were never really one of us." He looked around for approval and got a few slow nods. Marlene said, soft and poisonous, "We'll always be grateful for the time you gave him." I let the silence sit for a 3 count. Then I said, in the calmest voice I own, "Dale, before you pass those papers around, I brought papers too." Priya Sinclair walked in the front door in a charcoal suit with a black binder under her arm, and I watched Dale's face do the first small flicker of doubt. "Everyone," I said, "this is Priya Sinclair. She's the estate attorney who drafted the Pruitt Family Trust, the one Dale paid $2,400 for in 2018. She's here at my request." I opened the binder on the dining table, next to the green bean casserole, and I turned it so the room could see. "Let's start with the house," I said. "This is the deed to the property we're standing in, recorded in Bell County in January 2012. Instrument on the top there. It's a warranty deed with right of survivorship, in Wade's name and mine. Dale, you signed your interest away at the closing. You remember, you called me the smart one." I slid it toward him. "What survivorship means, in plain English, is that when Wade died, this house became 100% mine, automatically, that same day. There's no will to fight and no family vote to take. You've spent 2 weeks trying to evict me from a house I already own outright. I could have called the sheriff on you the moment you walked in." The color started leaving Dale's face in patches, the way it does on a man who has never once had to check his facts. "Now the trust," I said, and I laid the second document beside the first. The Pruitt Family Trust, signed September 19th, 2018. You all remember signing it. Dale, you told everyone to just make Glenda the trustee because she likes that stuff. Marlene, you witnessed it. Cole, that's your signature right there. I put my finger on the page. A trustee isn't a secretary. A trustee is the person the law puts in charge. I am the sole trustee. That means the car lot property on Veterans Memorial, the land under Pruitt Auto Sales, is held in a trust I control. It means the duplex on Zephyr Road, the one you live in, Dale, is held in a trust I control. For 6 years, every asset this family has answered to my signature. You just didn't read the paper. Nobody moved. The only sound in the whole house was the refrigerator humming through the kitchen doorway, and, somewhere down the block, a lawnmower that wouldn't catch on the first pull, sputtering and dying, sputtering and dying. Cole was the first to break. Dad, that's not how that works, right? She can't." "She can," Priya Sinclair said, quiet and pleasant. "She has since 2018. It's all properly recorded. I'd be happy to walk anyone through it." Marlene reached for the trust document, and I let her hold it. I watched her read the word trustee next to my name, and I watched her understand, finally, 13 years late, exactly who had been cooking the brisket. Her hand started to shake. "Here's where we are," I said. I did not raise my voice 1 inch. "The survivor benefits, Wade's SGLI, the $400,000, the annuity, the DIC, are mine by federal law as his named widow. There is no loophole to correct, Dale. The government does not recognize the concept of a temporary wife. Neither does the Bell County recorder. Neither does this trust." I turned to Nuala, who was standing by the mantel with her arms crossed and fire in her eyes, and I nodded. Nuala held up her phone. "And in case anyone in this room still thinks I'm the villain," I said, "my friend Nuala was standing next to Marlene at the funeral home 2 weeks ago. Marlene, would you like to tell everyone what you said, or should I play it?" Marlene's mouth opened, and nothing came out. I did not play it. I didn't have to. The threat of it, the timestamp of it, The fact that I had it, that was enough. The room had already tilted. I could feel it swing back to level and then keep going. All those cousins and neighbors and soldiers now looking at Dale's gray face and Marlene's shaking hands and Cole's open mouth, and understanding all at once what kind of people had walked into a widow's home 2 weeks after a military funeral and tried to take the flag off her mantle. "Now," I said, and I slid the 2 documents from Sinclair Law across the table, one to Dale, one to Cole. "This first letter is formal notice that as trustee, I'm terminating the family's tenancy at the Zephyr duplex, effective in 60 days. You've paid $650 a month for a property you told everyone you owned. You don't. You never did." The second letter is notice that I'm reviewing the car lot's finances as trustee because the trust I manage has been subsidizing Dale's losses for years, and I have a duty to the trust, not to Dale's pride. I let that land. I haven't decided what I'll do with the car lot yet, but the decision is mine, not the family's. Mine. Dale sat down. He actually lowered himself into one of my dining chairs like his legs had quit, the manila folder with his $500 letter sliding off his lap onto the floor. And he looked up at me with the face of a man who has just discovered that the ground he's been stomping on for 13 years was a trapdoor the whole time, and I was the one holding the latch. "Glenda," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. "Now let's be reasonable. We're family." "We were family for 13 years, Dale," I said. "You never once used the word until the second you needed it. You called me a temporary wife in my own living room 2 weeks after I buried my husband in front of his friends and yours. You wanted to know how family works?" I looked at the folded flag on the mantel, then back at him. "It works like this. The person who holds the paper decides, and I hold all of it." Marlene started to cry. Real tears now, not the funeral home kind. And I felt nothing but the clean cold of a debt finally called. Cole was saying something to Priya about options, and Priya was handing him her card and saying he was welcome to hire his own attorney, though I'd want them to see the recordings first. Brett, who'd driven in from Temple for the free food, had gone very still by the drinks table. And the crowd that had tilted toward Dale 20 minutes earlier, began quietly to gather their coats. Dale and Marlene left first. They did not take the green bean casserole. Cole tried, at the door, to say something about how we can work this out as a family, and I told him the trust's next distribution meeting was in October, and he was welcome to submit a written request like anyone else. Then I closed my front door, the front door of the house I have owned outright since 2012, and I turned the deadbolt, and the click of it was the most peaceful sound I'd heard in 2 weeks. Here's how it ended, because in these stories, people always want to know that the wicked stayed powerless, and they did. I terminated the Zephyr tenancy. Dale and Marlene moved into a $1,150 a month apartment off Tremere Road, the same complex, as it happens, where they'd tried to stash me. As trustee, I put Pruitt Auto Sales under a real accountant, discovered Dale had been running $9,000 a month in personal expenses through the business, and I shut that off with a single letter. I didn't sell the car lot out of spite. I did something that hurt Dale far worse. I kept it, professionalized it, put Cole on a documented salary with a boss who wasn't his daddy, and made the whole family understand that the money now flowed through Glenda. Every Pruitt who wanted anything from the trust submitted it in writing, to me. The bookkeeper's daughter did the books. The temporary wife made it permanent. The $400,000 was mine and stayed mine. I gave $40,000 of it away that first year, but not to the Pruitts. I set up a small fund at the Fort Hood Family Readiness Group in Wade's name for young Army spouses who find themselves suddenly widowed and suddenly told they don't count. Nuala runs it with me. We call it the Wade Pruitt Fund, and the first grant, $2,500, went to a 23-year-old widow whose in-laws had changed the locks on her before the flag was even in her hands. I know that story. I know it in my bones. On a Sunday in the fall, the live oak Wade and I planted in 2013, finally tall enough to throw real shade, I had the people who'd stood by me over to the house on Cardinal Lane. Nuala brought her kids and a tray of her mother's soda bread. Priya Sinclair came in jeans, for once, and let me pour her a bourbon. My mother, Dorothy, 71 now and long retired from cleaning motel rooms, sat in the good chair, the main table chair, the one Marlene never let me near, with her feet up, and I cooked brisket and King Ranch chicken and my mother's peach cobbler in the kitchen I painted wheat bread with a man I loved. There were no Pruitts there. There didn't need to be. Family, it turns out, is the people who stand next to you when the crowd tilts the wrong way. Nuala raised her glass at the end of the night and said, "To the temporary wife," and everybody laughed, because we all knew by then how permanent I was. After they left, when the house was quiet and the porch light did its old flicker as the AC kicked on, I stood in front of the fireplace for a minute. I had moved the folded flag off the mantel that morning to dust the ledge, and it had been sitting on the side table all day, waiting. I picked it up with both hands, the way the soldier had handed it to me, the blue field and the 3 white stars snug in that tight triangle, and I set my husband's folded funeral flag back on the mantel of the home that's mine.